to film, The Werewolf of London and The Wolf Man, respectively, and in 1943, Roy William Neill staged the encounter of the man-wolf with Frankenstein's monster. Earl C. Kenton recycled this idea in 1944 in his film The House of Frankenstein, which rekindled public interest in the subject and which was exploited with The House of Dracula. Charles T. Barton made a comedy, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, in 1948, and 9 years later Gene Fowler came out with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, in which an insane psychiatrist transformed a teenager into a savage beast by means of a drug. In 1960, Terence Fisher released The Curse of the Werewolf, which was an adaptation of the novel The Werewolf of Paris by Guy Endore. In this story, the monster was born as the result of the love affair between a beggar and a servant. Then, in 1980, Joe Dante gave us The Howling, in which a pack of werewolves lives hidden inside a clinic. This film inspired 3 sequels made by Felipe Mora, John Doe, and Neil Sunstum. In short, up to 1994, when Jack Nicholson starred in the film Wolf, there were no less than 166 films on the subject, all works by British and American filmmakers. Today, the werewolf has become a staple of fantasy and horror films, and a new mythology surrounding it has evolved on a foundation of psychological and psychoanalytical ingredients. In literature, we can go back to Cervantes, who talks of islands of werewolves and witches who change into wolves in his Priscillas and Sigismunda. Then we find, in addition to a poem titled Der Loup-garou by Annette von Droste-Hulshoff, 1797 to 1848, 17 novels, tales, and novellas from Le Menu des Loups, The Wolf Leader by Alexandre Dumas, which places the lycanthrope phenomenon under the sign of a pact with the devil, to more modern efforts from great names such as Rudyard Kipling, H.P. Lovecraft, C.D. Seemack, and Boris Vian. We can add to this hasty list The Wolf's Bride, Sundin Morsian, by Aino Kallas, 1878 to 1956, who delved into Estonian folklore for her story. The Werewolf, Liebehund, 1912, by August Kitzberg, 1855 to 1927, in which a young woman puts up resistance to the despotism of the church and social mores and ends up being taken for a werewolf. And finally, the novel also called The Werewolf, Varulven, 1958, by Axel Sansemos, 1899 to 1965. Also, some journeymen of a craft guild in Prosper Mérimy's book, Les Jacqueries, adopt the banner of the werewolf. The story of the werewolf does not end here, because the figure never fails to haunt the imagination, and it has appeared in role-playing games. Today there are DVDs of role-playing games such as Frankenstein and the Werewolf, The Werewolf of London, The Werewolf of Paris, and so on, as well as card games and miniature figures. There are restaurants, like that in Mont-Tremblant in Quebec, and motels, such as that of Sainte-Adèle in the same province, that are under the sign of the werewolf. Films and novels have contributed to keeping the myth alive, and have most likely inspired the re-folklorization of the werewolf. Folklore. Folklore has kept it in memory, and contains many accounts of werewolves. These accounts tell of their attacks on children, young girls, women, domestic animals, sometimes their destruction of the harvests, and finally their taste for human fat. It was even believed that werewolves were under the orders of the clergy and the lords to terrorize the common folk and bring them back into the religious fold, control their lifestyles, and dissuade them from going out at night. Some places were dreaded, such as Les Landes de Bouc, the Billy Goat's Moor, in the Piedmont region of the Pyrenees, as locations where witches and werewolves gathered. Other place names evoke the presence of lycanthropes. For example, the place called La Liberté in the French Alps. On the island of Guernsey there is the cave known as La Crue des Varus, and there is the Camp du Varou next to the cromlech of La Arrée, and finally Montvarou in the parish of Saint-Sever. The Rue Saint-Fiacre, Holy Handsome Street, in Ancenis, the department of Loire-Atlantique, was formerly the Rue du Garou. In the Vendée region we have the Pierre des Loups-garous, Stone of the Werewolves, in Brie-Barré, and the Pierre du Bois du Garou, Stone of the Wolfwood, in Saint-Michel-Mont-Mercure. The Mont Garou in the Orne region was the 11th century Mons Valhulf. There is a place named Les Garous in the Tarn region, and we find the Fountain of Margarou.